Pledge of allegiance.
I'd like to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
See what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the minutes from the meeting held on October 18, 2021. Would you like to make a motion on that?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Stephanie Verbeck.
No second.
Thank you.
David Bartlett.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor? None. Citizens' comments. Anybody in the audience tonight that would like to speak? Anybody online? All right. And board member comments. Seeing none. Take a look at the next committee and board meetings. Our next meeting is on Monday, December 20th, here. The education, facilities, and finance committees need to determine their next meetings.
Yeah, Mrs. Herbeck and I spoke today, and we're looking at December 15th, maybe, for the Education Committee at 3:15, if that works for members of the committee. Okay, we can plan on that, looks like. So 3:15 on December 15th. And that'll be in the Norway Savings Bank conference room.
And facilities and finance to be determined.
Still working on trying to calculate a date that'll work for everybody.
Okay. The next Region 9 board meeting is this Wednesday at 6 p.m. And committee reports. Let's start with the Education Committee and Stephanie.
Yes, we met, I guess 2 Thursdays ago on the 18th. It was our first meeting, and we had a sneak peek at some of the things you're going to hear from Mr. Kenny today. Portrait of a Maine Grad, updates, 7 peaks, and a new Rev Grant initiative, which sounds pretty awesome. And the rest of the time we used to, it was delightfully productive. We came up with a lot of goals and just set them for the next academic year.
And Ms. Herbeck was elected chair.
And facilities, Marcy?
At our last meeting that was on the 17th, right? Yeah. We did nominate a chair and a vice chair. We did review and had really a lot of engagement around 2 of the policies that are on the agenda for tonight. And also did the same in terms of kind of talking about some possible kind of projects and brainstorming of some ideas for the future.
Thank you. And Aaron, finance committee?
We met on the 18th and elected a chair, myself and the vice chair, Stephanie Erickson. We reviewed and signed warrants and reviewed the status of the fiscal year 22 general fund budget. We established a timeline for working on FY23 budget and briefly discussed upcoming TEA negotiations. We have a couple items on the agenda this evening that we'll be recommending approval, and our next meeting date is to be determined.
Thank you. And Ms. Taylor, Region 9?
Hope everybody had a positive Thanksgiving vacation, I guess, or holiday, or whatever. And it's great to be here. Our last meeting for Region 9 was on November the 3rd, so it's been a while. So some of the updated information. At that meeting, Dr. Gammon submitted and we accepted her resignation from as the director of Region 9. However, like some other people that we know, couldn't stay away from the school. And so consequently will be reinstated on December the 13th. We had a report from Jen Whitworth, who is the Student Services Director, who indicated to us that the present enrollment is approximately 120 students, which is down about 30% from the usual 170 or so. So, work at it. Also, we had a report from the computer science person, and an interesting point he made, which I asked, is because a computer science program does not have a lot of students either. And I asked him why. He said, well, he said, if you think about it, he said, the students that he has now today, he said, when I mentioned to them that a few years ago, there was one computer in a classroom, they look at me like, you know, I must be crazy or something. Now everybody has a computer, or several of them, and so forth, and so his comment was that he thinks now that that the computer program needs to get into either something like maybe some different, more sophisticated computer work, or get down to the lower levels. Because he said, you know, kids really aren't interested in going to a computer class when they probably know, well, they don't know more than that instructor, but certainly more than probably I do. So, yeah, so that was an interesting comment. Also, we adopted BED, which I noticed is on your agenda as well, for the remote participation. We have one COVID case, I guess, over the holidays, and so one teacher is on sabbatical for 10 days or so. But other than that, they're keeping, and I'm sure you people are too, diligent care about who's doing what and where. One thing I want to mention, and I've been told that it's very important to mention, so I will. We intend to institute a plumbing program next year. And so we need people's help in publicizing that. We're on the road starting to investigate what the program would look like, which means going to other plumbing programs throughout the area and seeing where the program can be located. But so any help, any push that you can make for kids to come to a plumbing class, that will make it a reality as opposed to a possibility.
Do you have a date on when that would start, to tell people?
Excuse me?
Is there a date
Yes, thank you for asking. Next year,
next year?
September.
Great.
Or August, or whatever, thank you. Let's see. Way back, remember, it was November and so forth. Before this, the report was that evidently they, I haven't been, but Region 9 typically has a Halloween walk where kids come through and they make little bags and stuff like that, and had almost 700 people go through.
Wow.
Most, I don't know, but they said that they had more than 360 bags made, and they had to make more, so. I'm assuming that most of them were kids, but I don't know. These kids at heart, right? December the 7th and 8th, there will be a light show at Region 9, so if you're in the area, be happy to have you there. We have, as you perhaps some of you know, a sad note in that we had a student who was killed in an automobile accident just before Thanksgiving. He was a freshman from Derigo. And both he and his two brothers had, or were attendees of Region 9. And so the family asked whether or not they could have their celebration of life at Region 9. And last Saturday, it came to be, and I understand that the parents were very interested because of the positive responses that the kids had and the care that they had for Region 9. So I think that's kind of an important one. Also, as you may know, Mountain Valley also lost a student, freshman, not currently, well, or ever a Region 9 student, but the student was killed with in a gun accident about the same time. They're both freshmen. high school. Okay, so, let's see what else. I guess, the Region 9 meeting that you mentioned is canceled for Wednesday. So we will not have a Region 9 meeting. And one other thing that I had forgotten to list here, but remembered, is that the principals and the administrators of the schools have been meeting together to look at the credit that are given to each student for the courses that they have in Region 9. I don't know if you folks know about that, but they get like 1/3 of a credit for English if they were in a particular class and so forth. And they're looking at that whole situation, which I think is very positive. And I think that's it, unless anybody has a question. I hope that everybody has a wonderful holiday season and a safe one. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to David for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, there have been a couple of appointments. Tanya Edgerly is a new Crescent Park School Ed Tech 3. Jack Mallory is the Telstar Middle School Ed Tech 1. No transfers since the last meeting. Other appointments is regarding coaching positions at Telstar High School. Boys head basketball coach Ryan Kimball. Boys assistant JV basketball coach Alec Newell. Alpine ski coach Asher Anderson. Telstar Middle School girls head basketball coach Natasha Howard. And I've just recently accepted the resignation of Tracy Walker, Food Services, and that'll be effective December 10th, 2021. Thank her for her many years of service in the district. This is really going to be the Mr. Kenny show tonight. He's going to be doing several presentations, but I'm going to skip down just to take care of a couple of other quick items before I turn it over to him. First of all, we did have the Maine School Management Association conference. I know some of you attended that. It was good. It was a lot of online presentations that we were able to kind of hold on to for a few weeks after that, and I thought it was, well attended. They are talking about finally having it back in person next year, if all goes well. So we'll see how that goes. And I know that Stephanie and Maggie and Erin were all part of that as well. I'd like to take a moment tonight to introduce Shelley Vogel. Shelley's our new curriculum director, and she's up back here. I wanted to ask her to come on down and maybe say a word or two.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I wasn't here the night that you approved my nomination for this position, but it was a last-minute thing, and I couldn't make it work. So I just want you to know that I've already been having great fun here, getting to know the staff in this building, meeting with teachers and curriculum leaders, and I'm working on a plan for what comes next. I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with Tanya and Jess to talk about elementary curriculum. So we're off to quite the start, and I'm thrilled to be here. So I look forward to getting to know all of you.
It's great to have you, and you'll be visiting the Education Committee in the upcoming future too.
The 15th, I hear.
Yes, that's right. Sounds good. Thanks, Shelley. It's great to have you on board. Great addition to the district for sure. COVID-19 updates. I know we're going to be talking about that in the discussion, but I just wanted to let you know that we are probably dealing with the biggest number of positive cases that we've had since the beginning of the pandemic. I know Rosemary and Mark were very busy today, touching base with close contacts, and I believe that the current number of positive cases in the district is in excess of 25. So that's a lot of people who have been identified, but the outstanding news is that we've been able to maintain in-school learning, and we have not been forced to go remote at all. So that's the good news. And I'm not sure how many people understand just how much work the administrators and the nurses spend on close contact identification, but it's a very important aspect of everything related to COVID, and I think that the time, effort, and energy that goes into it is appreciated by people in the community, and I want to thank them too, because I know it's a very, very difficult situation sometimes, especially if it's a Saturday or a Sunday or later in the evening. a lot of phone calls, a lot of connections, and we have a great team. You need to know that. Our people work very well together, and I think are always on the lookout for the best interests of the kids. So, setting him up in a positive light, I would now like to introduce Mr. Kenny, who will provide you with an overview of several projects that he has going on, and then I've also asked him, when he's done with that, just to kind of bring us to speed with the winter sports program too. So, it's all yours, Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. So in your packets, hopefully you received some handouts that go with all the different initiatives that are going on between the middle school and the high school and the entire district. The first one, really briefly, just to go back over, is the Seven Peaks project, which is something that we're working on grades 6 through 12. And it leads up to the senior capstone presentation, where the seniors look back over their 7 years here at Telstar. And each year they have a mini capstone project along the way that leads to their journey as to what they're going to do after high school. In the handout you can see each of the guiding questions each grade has their annual theme based upon, and they work on collecting evidence pieces towards this that go into the digital portfolio that in the middle school and grade 9, and will be expanding to the high school, is part of their student-led conference in the spring. In the past, the student-led conference was a big binder with lots of papers to flip through and look at, all the entry slips, but really had no focus on anything. This really focuses on what the kids do in 3 major projects throughout the year. In middle school they work on in rap, in high school they work on in their Seven Peaks classes with their mentors. It really has them doing a lot of reflecting, building for the future, and really looking at having all the skills that they're going to need to be successful in whatever they choose to do after graduation. And the biggest goal is that they all have something, a plan that's going to help them be successful in whatever that's going to look like and going to be for them, whatever fits them best. So that's the first thing on there. The second is the portrait of a grad. You have the graphic symbol that came back from the portrait of a grad work. We've been working on that for the last 1.5 years, and that came about through a lot of help from the community, from the board, from staff, students, parents, surveying, trying to figure out what we want for every student at graduation from Telstar High School to have as 6 core competencies. And on that list you can see the 6 key terms and themes that were the collective that everybody kind of put down together. We had between staff, students, parents, and community members, over 400 surveys returned to pull this data from collectively to come up with what we want for all of our kids to have. And they are terms and themes that we're going to work and build on programming for in the middle school and high school. And we're going to work on from curriculum work, K through 12, all leading towards the same common goal. So that's the portrait of grad work. We have not been able to do a lot of our community gathering for that kind of work and celebration, but we will hopefully be able to do more come spring. We can be outside again. Maybe I'll show it off a little bit more and explain more as we go forward. And the last thing is the Rev Grant in there. The Rev Grant is a $250,000 grant that we are applying for. We just found out the deadline has been extended into January, but our application is ready to go. We are submitting this grant for a new pathway for our student body to choose from. It builds on the best parts of what happened at TFA with outdoor learning and recreation and education, and will expand new courses in through the high school that feed this same pathway for kids who really like this hands-on science approach. It's very STEM focused and STEM based. And we're also going to have activities that reach down into the middle school that leaves a feeder program going into grade 9 and then coming out of it. Part of that is, and our earmark for our program, is the coursework, the professional development for the coursework, but also to build an outdoor classroom pavilion, which will actually be 2 outdoor classrooms. It will expand our greenhouse and build a sugar shack for the kids in the ecology class, which is something they tried last spring. They really enjoyed, had a lot of success, and really brought the whole school together in building this. And if we are awarded the grant, we'll find out in late March. And we have until July 1st of 2023 to spend the $250,000. Most of it will go towards the building, the equipment, the furniture, the places out there, and all the pieces that make that a viable space. It'll also be a space for outdoor community events. So that's a big part of that grant. It all was based out of the ecology class last year with Mrs. Bloss. They want to start an ecology club based out of that, and to be able to expand, and it also works with Bryan Pond and Humane Extension for trying to find ways for our kids to expand and see different recreational, outdoor career paths for themselves in the local area beyond high school. So it all works together to build that pathway for them. So that's an initiative that we're working on as well. So my list.
Yeah, and Mark, you had mentioned in the education committee about the possibility of students as early as freshman year picking up college credits. You want to talk
We
about that?
started that now. The Freshman Academy this year, we have an early college program working with Ryder Scott and the Humane staff, where the kids will work on an outdoor leadership program. And if they fulfill both components, they will now leave ninth grade with 4 Humane College graduate credits for free. That builds into the other dual enrollment classes they can take throughout high school. And that pathway, if they finish the whole thing, could be up to 15 Humane credits by the time they graduate high school without having to pay. There are other dual enrollment classes we do through Humane Presque Isle, SMCC, Humane Augusta, and Orono for kids. And this new pathway we'll be building for the ecology track and also some courses like that. It's a track that kids can choose to opt in for the entire thing, or they can pick and choose classes that are of interest to them and still get the credits, but they don't have to do the entire pathway. So we have a lot of different options going on.
Yeah, I would just add 2 things too to what Mark has said. And one is that the Western Maine Collaborative has really supported the effort for the Portrait of a Maine Grad, has funded that and has paid for Cora Saul, who's done a lot of professional development for us in other ways to work with the staff to help get us where we are now. So that's been very helpful. And then I just want to say kudos too to Mr. Kenny and all the people that have been working on this Rev Grant. I'll tell you, and this came up at the Education Committee, this is a lot of work. And this was work that happened all summer long, so people had to give up a lot of their own personal time in order to participate in this. And I cringed a little bit when you said there's a January extension, because I think when we met with the Education Committee, you thought that maybe Telstar was the only school that had actually stepped up and submitted a grant in this region.
We're one of only 2 right now that have shown that they have an application ready for this round.
That's great.
So
That's great. Well, congratulations to you and to everybody that's put a lot of time and effort into that. That's exciting
I'm
stuff.
lucky to have a good team.
Yeah, you do. You do. And the other piece too, and I don't know, Mark, don't want to add to your pile here, but accreditation is coming up, the high school accreditation, and all of these things that Mr. Kenny just outlined, it's almost like we're dropping them into a funnel, and all of that is coming together to help provide some of the base for the accreditation work that has to be done. So,
Which will be mid-October next fall, our
Yeah.
final accreditation visit.
yeah, we'll have a visit. So that's great. And so I don't know if there's any questions for anybody about that, and if not, I'm just going to ask Mr. Kenny to roll right into the winter sports.
Sure. Winter sports are underway. We are still looking for some coaches for the Nordic program and the middle school Alpine program. Basketball middle school they are playing games tonight. They started last week before Thanksgiving. High school practices started today, and they're rolling forward. This year, because of all the different COVID rules, the Mountain Valley Conference came back with some guidelines as far as spectators and travel, concessions. So we are following suit with the majority of MVC schools, where we are masked during the school day. All spectators, all players, all officials, all coaches wear masks at all times. We are allowing each player 4 tickets for parents and family friends to come to each game. The gym has been laid out, and there are sections taped in the bleachers, just like at graduation time, for family pods, all being distant. We have a student section, which is not limited based on seats because they're here already during the day. And we have a teacher section. We have a couple staff members who are also working to help collect the tickets for contact tracing purposes and for attendance purposes at the games. So that's, and there are no visiting spectators at all but 3, I think, of the MVC schools, that all schools are following the same, that no traveling spectators. But we're very lucky with What TV, who's helping us to make sure that all of the games are broadcast, so that if you can't be there in person here at Telstar, you still have access to watch the games, which is a huge undertaking for middle school and high school basketball games. That could be most weeknights, 4 games in a week. And they are donating their time and coming and being present at all those games to ensure it's possible that everybody has access to watch the games. Because of the rules too, Unfortunately, our booster club is not able to sell concessions because there is no food or drink allowed in the gyms because they're asking that nobody's unmasked during the games. So this is a huge hit for them financially, to not be able to fundraise. So we are trying to put a donation jar out at the games for people to still donate to the booster club because even though they're not selling food or bringing in funds, they are still spending on our kids and our teams. And so every little bit helps and allows them to keep doing the good work they're doing to support the coaches and support the players to make it all possible. They also provide meals for our away teams since they aren't able to stop and eat. They send a bag lunch through Chef Kimball to all for the kids for the away games that come back. So they're feeding our kids at night, which is a huge undertaking and greatly appreciated. And they eat well, better than doing this off of McDonald's. Alpine and Nordic ski teams are, well, until we get some snow, are still on hold. We also have a collaboration with the Bethel Rec and Mount Abram this year for a rec ski program on Thursdays and Fridays to go down to Mount Abram after school. That is something they're doing for the Bethel Rec. And they are transporting, they're paying to transport the kids. And Mount Abram's helping with rentals and for equipment for those who need it. And we're looking to possibly do something with the Nordic program and the outing club in Bethel Rec as well for kids who want to learn to ski but aren't ready for the race program, which is very different than that's what we provide for the school teams, our competitive racing teams for Nordic and Alpine. So once we can fill out our coaching positions, we have kids signed up ready to participate. We're just getting ready to go, and Mother Nature's going to help a little bit.
Some good examples of the way that we're trying to work with the community to do as many things as possible for the kids. So, thank you, Mr. Kenny.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, what can we do to support the boosters? I know you said there'll be a tip jar game, but is there any other ways that we can get word out and try to raise some money? Like,
I will talk to the president, we'll get something out.
Okay.
I know somebody who knows somebody, so we get the word out and try to do some fundraisers. I think we're still interested, try to do some fundraisers for them to help them out so that they already have plans, they want to be able to see their plans through.
Great.
So that's a big piece of it. So thank you for asking. All right, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the high school principal's report tonight.
All right, no old business on the agenda, new business. We do have a discussion item tonight to review the masking protocol in place in MSA 44. When Stephanie and I met with David to go over the agenda, we decided it was appropriate time to look at the policy and just not have any sort of vote on it, but just discuss it, get an update on where things stand. Given that one concern from a lot of the citizens and board members was about the vaccine being eligible for all students, and now that it is, we thought it was appropriate timing to at least look at it and get a discussion on the table. Again, no vote, we're not looking to take any votes tonight, change anything. We just wanted to get a discussion out ahead of time before we do take a vote on it, again, at a later meeting. So, I'll let you add anything if you'd like.
Sure. Just even since that meeting, we've had an influx of cases that we've seen, and I know Rosemary and Tanya and Jess and Mark have been dealing with that quite a bit over the past, well, today in particular, but over the holidays we also had some people that were contacting us to let us know that they had positive cases. We did have a vaccine clinic at Crescent Park the week before the Thanksgiving break, and we had about 50, is that about right, people who signed up between elementary students, and then we had some staff who also signed up for some booster shots. And the tough part is we don't know how many kids have been vaccinated because we don't necessarily get that information if somebody goes to Walgreens or somewhere to get their personal vaccine. But we were pretty happy with the turnout that we had with the Crescent Park clinic. And I want to thank Rosemary. She was like on the doorstep of the clinic people to make sure we were first in line when the time came for that option. So we are trying to do whatever we can to get the vaccines out, to encourage people to do the pool testing, and do whatever we can. But everything you're hearing right now is, especially with this new variant coming in, they don't know really what the implications of that are going to be. But if you watch the news at all tonight, the mantra is the same. It's just get vaccinated. The vaccinations are key in addition to some of the other things that we've been doing since the beginning of the year. And the good news is, you know, we have not been in a situation, unlike many other school systems in the area, where we've had to go remote or we've had to close the school. So we've been able to keep all of our schools open, we've been able to keep our kids in school, which was the goal in the beginning of the year. And, you know, we do have the isolated positive cases where the kids are having to quarantine, but the number of kids that are quarantining this year has been reduced drastically because of some of the measures that you have in place. So I don't know, do you want me to just see if there's anything else from the people that have been working on it before we launch into it?
Sure, yep.
All right, I don't know if anybody, Rosemary or any of the building administrators want to add anything to that. I know this is really a board discussion, but if there's anything you wanted to chime in on.
Yes, we have had more cases in the last, 2 weeks than we've had this whole time, so just, really don't think this is a time to make any masking changes right now, especially with the cases, nationwide increasing right now. We're definitely seeing that here at school as well.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to echo what Rosemary said as well. We're seeing more cases at all schools, and I don't think this is the appropriate time to be making any changes. We've been very fortunate with the amount of kids that we have been able to keep in school based upon the fact that there is mandatory masking. We have a lot of people in schools testing, and I think given all of those things that are in place right now, things are going really well, and I don't think that this is the time to be making any changes.
Anybody else?
I'd say we're seeing a mix of both vaccinated and unvaccinated cases. So it has not just been unvaccinated. It is a lot of work. They're not pleasant phone calls to make, but because of the policies we have in place, no one loves this. No one is enjoying this, but it's keeping kids in school. It's keeping our doors open. It's not easy, but right now it's making it possible. So.
And we have not had a chance to meet as a group since it was decided to add this to the agenda because we had to cancel our last meeting because the speaker that we had wasn't able to make it. John?
I would just like to add to Mark's, since we started wearing the masks, all the staff and students we're all wearing them. And there's not a problem from the dean's perspective. We have a system in place where violations can be reported so we can address them, and they're at near zero. That means compliance is 100%. The kids are wearing them, and they're not complaining. We all hate them. We don't want to wear them, but we're all doing it, and so.
Sorry, Mrs. Fraser. And if anyone is new on the board, John is our Dean of Students at the high school, John Elliott.
Yeah, so it's not an issue as far as that goes at the high school or middle school.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
David?
I thought I was going to be saying something new, but in fact I guess I'm going to summarize what we've just been hearing. Infection rates remain high, they're increasing in the district. We don't yet know the results of Thanksgiving, but they can't be good. A new variant is approaching. Vaccination of younger children is just beginning. Medical advice that we receive remains the same as it has been. Our students and staff remain healthy and happy and better off than elsewhere to a very considerable extent from what I can understand. And it's quite clear that our staff, faculty, staff, are convinced that we should stick with it. Thanks.
Stephanie?
I think it's important to check in on this periodically. I think we've made a decision and things are always changing, and it's important to constantly be looking at data and number changes, so when the time comes that we can, hopefully someday all agree that it's the responsible thing to do to take these off and make that step. I don't think for all the reasons, I'm not going to say them all again, that now is the time, but masking has allowed, I know my kids in the 8th grade and the 5th grade have gotten a lot of phone calls about close contact, and they haven't had to quarantine, and I think there's just been a lot of mitigation in that department, and keeping kids here and learning and the learning loss over the past couple of years because of quarantine and remote learning has just caused students have to stay back, and it's so hard to catch up. And I think we're in a good spot. We're taking small steps with sports and basketball and allowing some spectators, and I think we're doing it really responsibly so far. So.
Yeah, just the one thing that came up, I have meetings on this just about every week, sometimes multiple meetings. I know one of the questions that we often hear is, okay, so when's the time going to come that we can not have to worry about wearing masks? And my understanding is that there is some conversation that's going to be taking place beginning of the year regarding, what is the metric for that? What would be the goal so that we would know when we would be getting close to that? Because right now, nobody really knows. And so my understanding is that that's a conversation that's going to be starting to take place, so maybe that will help us at least have some idea of when that light is going to be at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I don't know that we'll see it in January or February, I don't know when, but at least it sounds like that conversation is happening, or will be happening.
And something else that I think you're working on is getting numbers on exactly kind of how many kids are being saved or not having to go into quarantine because of the mask versus the social distancing and the vaccine and all the other avenues they have.
Yeah, and I would defer to the building administrators and the nurse on the exact numbers on that, but I know that if this was a year ago and we were experiencing the same situations that we're experiencing now, we would have been closed any number of times already this year, gone remote, full remote, the kids would not be in school. I don't know that we have the exact numbers about, what's the difference between the number of kids who've been quarantined and not quarantined. I don't know, Tanya, did you have anything on that?
I can give you an example. So I do at Crescent Park have 75% of our students enrolled in pool testing, which is absolutely fabulous. So every Tuesday, 200 kids get enrolled and they get tested. That being said, when we have a positive pool in a classroom, there are 4, 5, 6 students, sometimes a few more, that are not enrolled. And if that's the case, if we have all of the other things in place, the distancing, they haven't been exposed in phys ed class, those kids are allowed to stay in school. If the mandatory masking policy was not in place, they would have to quarantine because all kids in a classroom, regardless, by definition, are identified as close contacts. So Mrs. Dupre's 5th grade class, for example, let's say there's 6 kids that aren't enrolled. Because they're in the classroom all day, they're identified as close contacts. Those 6 kids, if they were not wearing masks and not enrolled in pool testing, they would have to quarantine. So depending on the situation, depending on the classroom, if we have a positive pool, it could be anywhere from 2 or 3 kids to 6 or 7 kids that would have to quarantine.
And Crescent Park has by far the highest percentage of students enrolled in pool testing. The other schools are significantly less than that, although I think the middle school and high school are catching up pretty quickly from what I understand. I think we have those
The
numbers.
middle school is 64%. The high school, sorry, I can't see. High school is 45, and then Woodstock is 47. So that's just students. Yep. Yeah. So we have about 50% in all of our schools. But that still means that 50% of the students, aren't enrolled and could potentially have to quarantine if they were exposed.
And then while we're at it, why don't you talk a little bit, if someone, it doesn't have to be you, Tanya, or whoever, but it can be. We also have times when the students have to be quarantined when they're not in the classroom, like on the buses and so on. And the same exceptions don't play out in those particular situations. You want to take a stab at that, Rosemary?
Yeah, so if a student is exposed on a bus or other non-classroom setting, it's treated a little bit differently because they're not stationary in one spot. So if somebody had a fitness class, for example, the kids in the fitness class would, if they're not in pool testing, they would be quarantined. If they were vaccinated or in pool testing, they would be able to stay. So, and the bus is the same as that.
Sports practices work the same way, so they're active and around. Does being at 6 feet in the classroom makes the biggest difference. And there's a few classrooms based on space and what their activities are doing. When they go inside that 6-foot bubble, but they're still outside the 3-foot bubble, which is allowed, it changes the close contact rule. And it puts more kids on the quarantine list. Community quarantine, but they're still allowed to be in school. There's multiple levels of quarantine, which is also highly confusing to everybody. And we have 4 different letters we have to send out every time we do this because depending on where you fall in the chart. But the majority are still able to stay in school because of what we have in place. We don't have to have as many kids out of school quarantining as we would possibly if the rules change. But it does affect them in different levels of community quarantine, which allows them to still be in school, just doesn't allow them to be out and about in the community outside of school.
Can I ask them a question?
Sure.
Can you clarify the 3-foot versus 6-foot? Because the way I read the standard operating procedure is that a close contact is within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes. If there's a universal masking, that's changed to 3 feet. Why, when I hear you say that students would have to be quarantined in a classroom if there wasn't a universal masking, is that because they're less than 6 feet away from each other? Or how do you calculate that?
So the standing operating procedure, it says the close contact definition is exposure within 6 feet or more for 15 minutes of the 24-hour period, or any direct physical contact. And then in a school setting where no assigned seating, the whole classroom will be counted as close contacts.
So-
A lot of our classrooms do have assigned seating, which is fabulous. But there's a piece in there that reads, when assigned seating is strictly adhered to, the close contacts will be identified using the definition above. Unfortunately, in our classrooms, we can't guarantee that Johnny is sitting in his seat all of the time. So there's movement going around, there's activities that they are doing, and they're not only in their seat for that the entire day. They don't move from there to the door to lunch. So we really can't guarantee that those assigned, we do have assigned seating, but we can't guarantee that that's strictly adhered to per their definition.
Thank you.
In middle school and high school, it's different too because they change classes every period. They have different groups. Elementary, at least, are in the same group all day long. So we have to go through period by period and try to figure out their seating in each class and how long they were within 6 feet or not of somebody. And then it goes on to the next class, do the same thing, and go from there.
And now, do you have to do that at a 3-foot distance because we're universally masked? Are you doing that now, just the distance is shorter?
It's, we have some, when the classroom is set at 6 feet, and we know their seat is 6 feet, it means that the bubble around that student who is positive is safe for everyone outside the bubble. But if they're inside, then they fall in the bubble of possibly having to quarantine, depending on where they fall on the chart. So 6 feet puts them in a safe zone. 6 feet or greater puts them in a safe zone if they're stationary.
And the assigned seating, does that still apply when there's universal masking, or is that just if there's not universal masking? So you're saying a classroom that there's movement, that applies whether there's universal masking or not?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
So I think what you're hearing is that none of us like this, but we've all tried to pretty much figure out how to make it work on behalf of the kids. And the goal that we all set in the beginning of the year was to do what we could to keep kids in school. And it's November 29th, and we've been successful in that so far. Not without a lot of work. And I think you've heard some of the specifics that the building administrators have to follow, and those specifics tend to be updated and shifted around and changed. The number of reasons for quarantining this year is much different than it was last year. And I know that one of the things that's being talked about as well at the state level is to listen to the concerns that are being expressed from the schools because we have situations now where kids are in pool testing, they can be with the same group of kids all day or whatever, and they can not have to quarantine, but then they could be in dance class with that same number of, same exact group of kids, but if it happens outside the school, then the regulations require that they have to be quarantined. And so we're trying to work with, I think the schools across the state are just trying to work with the state to say, are there ways that we can kind of look at this and see if we can make more sense out of it? And I think those conversations are going to continue to take place. The good news is, we have seen that the results of thought and consideration about different topics that come up do sometimes result in adjustments to the protocols that we have to follow.
Any further discussion?
Big, fat, huge thank you to the back of the room.
Yeah, right, yes.
So much work.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Some clarification, if a student isn't enrolled in pool testing and they're identified as a close contact, they would have to quarantine regardless of masking, correct?
Yep.
They wouldn't? So the combination of them masking, universal masking, and the distance would make it so they do not have to quarantine?
The difference in that
Any further discussion? So again, we just wanted to open up the dialogue on that, and we will continue to review it as needed moving forward. Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to number 3. See what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the Rethinking Responsive Education Venture, Rev Grant application. And the Education Committee have a recommendation?
Yes, the Education Committee recommends going forward and approving the Rev Grant.
And this has to come to the board because it's such a large grant application that you need to approve it before it gets submitted.
All right, that does not require a second. Is there any discussion?
I think we've heard a very convincing presentation, without any negative possibilities.
Just out of curiosity, is it a state or a federal grant?
It's a good question. It's a state grant. I don't know if it's coming as a result of federal money. I don't know that. I know it's a state DOE grant.
Right. The state paid for the class and we paid for
Right.
as part of the grant.
Any further discussion on that? All right, all in favor?
Thank you.
You missed it. It's okay,
She's not here.
have a vote on another one. Shouldn't have to vote on every item.
She should. Shouldn't have to.
Okay,
I guess it's an abstention.
mark that. All right, number 4, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approving the job description for MSAD 44 Curriculum Director, and the Policy Committee has a recommendation.
The Policy Committee recommends approval of the Curriculum Director job description.
You're gonna get a great big S and hand it to Shelley and have her wear it right here. You had a chance to look at the job description at the last meeting, and Shelley was actually involved in that too, because I had done a draft and submitted it to her and said, what else can you do? And she sent back a whole laundry list of things, which got added to it. And I just want to say too that as the year goes on and as we acclimate to being able to have somebody like Shelley and somebody like Jeannie here this year, we're going to do a lot of conversations back and forth about, okay, now that we've got the right people in place, and believe me folks, we do, how do we best realign some of the responsibilities? And so I'm sure we'll be coming back to you, and even though the job description currently says that Shelley's going to do all these things, it may be at the end of the year that we shuffle some things around and we say, okay, well, the other two of them down, they're giving each other high fives. But the term in the past, the school board has used the term develop a strong bench, and we have a strong bench right now. We have people that can work together and do a multitude of things, so it's exciting. So I said to Shelley, you've seen this, you're sure you're okay with it? She goes, yep, I'm fine with it. So it's with everybody's recommendation, including the curriculum directors, that we support the policy committee's recommendation.
further discussion on that? All in favor? Number 5, see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the superintendent's nomination of Dr. Michael Muir as District Technology Director for fiscal year 22 and 23, and the negotiations committee has a recommendation.
The negotiations committee recommends approval of this nomination.
And the salary will be at $78,143 in year 1, and then year 2 will be open. The negotiations committee has talked about wanting to have year 2 open for everybody so that they can look at all of the positions at the same time. It's been some this year, some next year, and so this will keep it all in the same lane. Mike's done a good job of helping to coordinate these meetings, so very important.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you for all of the work that you've had to do through the pandemic, and like it's just this whole extra lift that nobody was ready to give you, and you just handled it with grace and ease, and just want to say thank you.
Thanks very much. And again, it pays to have a good team. I've got a good team behind me.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Number 6, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the superintendent's nomination of Julie Hart as District Adult and Community Education Director for fiscal year 22 and 23, and the negotiations committee has a recommendation.
The negotiations committee recommends approval of this nomination.
And the salary being recommended on this, and the benefits don't change for any of these positions, they're the same. The salary would be $60,000 for this year, and then it would be open for negotiations with the rest of the administrators for year 2.
Any discussion? All in favor? And number 7, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval to increase the rate of pay for substitute custodians and food service workers to $12.75 per hour effective January 1st, 2022. And anybody has to make a motion on that?
And this is just a change in the state law, minimum wage. And this goes into effect in January 1st. It doesn't go into effect right away.
I will make a motion to approve the increase.
Stephanie Herbeck,
I'll second.
Cheryl.
And yeah, like David said, this is just reflecting the minimum wage increase in the state, so. Any discussion? David?
I think it's terrible that we only pay a service worker $12.75 an hour. And I think we ought to take a look at that next year and boost that up considerably. Right now with the school bus driver shortage and the bonuses that companies are giving out to these drivers, I'm sure these service workers are not looking at that too friendly. So.
And these are for substitutes too. These aren't the actual people who negotiated for, because we did give them, they got a new contract last year, and you remember it was like $1 an hour increase because of those reasons that you just mentioned too. So this is just for your substitute custodians and food service workers.
I still think that they should get paid more than $12.75 an hour.
I concur with David, and I would add that I think there is a certain embarrassment that we should feel in authorizing what is in fact we are compelled to do in any case by the minimum wage. I realize we have to authorize it, but to find ourselves, in a sense, at the last minute, authorizing paying the absolute legal minimum to people who, whether they are substitutes or not, perform very important, kind of vital tasks around here, seems to me both something of an embarrassment and also problematic in that, as far as I can see from the advertisements for employment, I wonder whether we're even going to be able to keep attracting people at the minimum wage. This is, frankly, this is not what McDonald's is paying.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that. I think this is just keeping you in line with what the state requires you to do. I think if the board would like to look at some point of directing the negotiations committee to take a look at paying all substitutes a higher rate, that would certainly potentially help attract more people to.
I think David is quite right in that regard, that obviously for the moment we're obliged,
Yeah.
but that we do need to consider this issue.
So I would suggest then that, we add that to one of the negotiations committee conversations down the road and bring it back to you, but in the meantime, I think approving what we have to do, it would be a good first step.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Any further?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Number 8, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of a first reading of revisions to policy JICA, dress code, attached proposal for change submitted by Mr. Kenny and Ms. Lecce. And the policy committee has a recommendation.
And actually, they don't. That's, this and the next item both state that the policy committee will have a recommendation, but it did go to the committee on the 17th. And after considerable conversation, on this item, they had a couple of questions or suggestions that they asked that Mr. Kenny and his team take a look at. And actually, we kicked it back to Mr. Kenny, and you saw the revised product that's in your packet. I do believe it addressed all the questions that came up.
Yes.
But the committee obviously hasn't had a chance to meet again since then, so I think it would be up to individual people at this point to make recommendations regarding the motion. I will say that I know this is, I think Mr. Kenny mentioned in his narrative there that this was a hot button issue at the middle school and high school last year. And I did have a chance to talk to Ms. Arsenault today. I did not get a chance to talk to Ms. Wilkie, but Ms. Arsenault felt as though it didn't have any ill bearing on anything going on at the elementary schools. So if this change in the policy was approved, it would be fine as far as the elementary level goes as well. And I know that a lot of time, effort, and energy went into this, and I think Mr. Kenny could answer any questions that you might have if you do have any. But again, something a lot of people put some time and effort into.
Let's get a motion on the floor before we
Yes,
get into
of
our
course.
discussion. The policy committee would like to make that motion.
I make a motion to approve the first, is it the first reading? It's the first reading?
Yeah.
First reading.
Yes, first
Second.
reading. Of the dress code policy.
David Jones. All right, thank you. Now discussion, David?
Sorry. It seemed to me that the new documents we received addressed the questions that the policy committee was concerned with. And my personal concern, I was assured that the student body had been appropriately consulted. And I presume that prior to a second reading, there would be some further consultation with the student body, since in the absence of a general level of agreement among the students that this is an acceptable code, it would be extremely difficult to enforce it. So, of course, I'm entirely in favor of approving the first reading.
Aaron, do you have a question?
No, that answered it, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I know my daughter, who's in 8th grade, throughout her middle school career has had some thoughts and concerns about the kind of outdated dress code that has caused a lot of discussion in her grade, and I think this addresses it all, and I thank everybody involved in doing that.
Any further discussion?
Now, can I ask, this is really like when they go to dances, is anything that's going on here? Or is that also?
That's a good question.
Is that a question for
That's
Mark?
a school.
Huh?
We focus on the 7:30 to 2:30 part of the day for our dress code, because we don't enforce the dress code outside the school day for people coming to the building wear hats. We don't enforce the dress code for adults that come in for different things, so this is focused on the school day for the student body.
Mhm.
further discussion? All in favor? Yes. All right, and number 9. See what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of a first reading of policy BED, remote participation in board meetings. And there's no recommendation, so let's get a motion on the floor and then we can discuss it.
I move that we return or continue our long-standing policy. Sorry, is that sufficiently precise?
Like pre-COVID or?
Our pre-COVID policy,
Okay.
with the understanding that we would continue to have, as the superintendent assures us, an emergency power in the case of an emergency situation. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, that would be a separate level of a remote meeting, so.
Sorry, I thought it was contained within the understanding that the past policy in case of emergency. It isn't.
No, it would be an adjustment to the past policy. So there's actually 3 different potential votes that you could take. One is to go back to the days of yesteryear,
Yep.
where you basically require all meetings in person, board members have to be here, public has to be here if they want to address the board. The second one would be that you can approve emergency, remote for emergency sessions only, and that would be in the event of, a mass pandemic or a snowstorm, and that would be when Danny and I, or the board chair and the superintendent, would confer and make the decision to have that particular meeting remote for that reason. And then the third level would be that you could make it open remote for.
If we agreed on if we chose the emergency power, would that involve us in all of the conditions, policy changes, regulations, etc., that have been presented to members of the board in various attachments, etc., to our documents? In other words, would it become an immensely difficult policy question, as number 3 would certainly be, or would it simply be up to us to say, it's an emergency, let's do it?
It would really be up to the board chair and the superintendent. I'll tell you that typically, past practice, we have another policy that says in the event that there's no school, there's no board meeting. So I can't see us probably having a board meeting on a night where there's a weather event. And then I think the only other option would be, if we did have like a sudden massive outbreak, that would give the board chair and the superintendent the ability to call it remotely. If you did do that, you'd have to announce it as early as possible, because if you did have that meeting remotely, then you would have to allow the community to participate remotely. So I think if you looked at that as an option, let's say, it gives you that ability to do it in the rare case that you would have to do it.
I'm sorry to have taken so long.
No, that's a good question.
May I adjust the motion to be that we adopt the intermediate proposal, that is primarily our long-term policy with the emergency.
To be determined by the board.
With the emergency condition to be determined by.
I'll second that.
Okay, can I, I don't know what the right point of something.
Point of order?
Thank you. I think that what we're asking is, a motion to approve this first reading as is, right? We're not looking to make, we're looking to, is that what I just want to point of clarification, that's what I want to say. We're moving to approve the first reading as it is written, according to what you sent us today in our notes, right?
Well, there are several options in those notes, so I think that's okay, the way that
Okay,
he's made the
okay.
motion.
I think he's choosing one of the options.
Yeah, that was what I intended anyway. I'm not sure I succeeded, but
Thank you.
The
Sorry.
second option is what I'm,
Right.
second option.
Okay,
Right.
thank you so much.
And just, I hope you had a chance, and I know there was a lot of information here, and I was led to believe it was gonna all be pulled down from YouTube on that date, but apparently they forgot to do it, so you had a chance to do it anyway. But Bill Stockmeyer did, I think, an excellent summary in there that talked about the different options. And if I could, just for a second, I just want to spend some time on that. So, and Mr. Jones did a nice job of setting the table on this, so I appreciate that too. The pre-COVID method would be that you would just go back to the way it used to be. You couldn't do any kind of remote. You could choose to broadcast it, you know, what TV can come in, we could put it online or whatever, but there would be no interaction. The second option, the one that Mr. Jones made the motion for, gives the board the ability to call an emergency meeting. And in the event that you do call an emergency meeting, it allows the board members to participate remotely. And when you allow the board members to participate remotely, you also are required to allow, that you have to allow the community to participate remotely. Not just watch it, but weigh in like we do now, like we have been doing since the pandemic. So that's that, and we like to have as much notice as possible, because if you do a remote meeting, you also have to try to provide as much of the information. You have to provide all the information to the people who are participating remotely, so they have an opportunity to see it. You also have to do your roll call votes and kind of revert back to the way that we were doing it during the pandemic. And then the third option, and most, you know, the most different option here would be that you can allow the ability to go remote for individual board members, for the full board, however. But when you do that, you also, again, have to open it up so that all members of the board, all members of the community can participate remotely. You have to give notice, so if you have someone who, you know, calls in at the last minute or whatever, then you have to scramble to try to make sure you get that information out to people. But it can be done. And so you would put that information out there, and that would give people the ability to participate remotely. But the minute you allow one person to participate remotely, as Bill Stockmeyer says in here, you have to allow everybody to participate remotely. So that's just a backdrop. So Mr. Jones's motion is on, I would call it the middle level change, which basically says you're pretty much reverting to the way that it was unless there's an emergency situation. And if there's an emergency situation as determined by the board chair and the superintendent in combination, then it would go remote, everybody would have the ability to participate remotely. And that's the motion that's on the table right now.
Discussion, yeah.
And that would include, because one of the pieces that was said in the video, right, that would include the specificity of the two of you having that authority, right? Like that would be included in our specific policy.
Yes, yeah. The only way the board could meet remotely in that motion would be if board chair and the superintendent agreed that that was necessary.
Is that written in there as is? Or would that be something we would have to add?
It would be it's written in that option, so that would be part of the option that would be included.
The option that we're voting on, is it all or nothing? Every board member would be remote, or every board member would be in person?
No, anytime a single board member is remote, it opens it up to everybody has to be remote.
But you were
Under
asking
this
about
option.
the number 2 option, right?
Right.
The number 2 option would be everybody. It would be in the event that the meeting itself went remote for everybody, it would be called by the superintendent and the board chair in combination.
Presumably this would be because it was such an emergency that the two of you concluded that
Correct.
a large proportion of the board weren't going to be able to get there.
Or that would
Or
be
shouldn't
unsafe.
try, or
It would be
shouldn't
unsafe.
try.
It would be unsafe or something, yes.
Right, sorry.
And aside from that, there would be no remote participation.
Correct.
Right.
Right. I mean, we could broadcast it, but there'd be no two-way.
Yeah.
The way that we've been doing meetings thus far through the pandemic, have we had to make the materials available to the public? I know we've made access available, but I believe that's a stipulation where they would have to have all the materials, all the agenda, all the attachments. Is that something that we've been doing in the past?
I don't think that was part of the requirement before, but it is part of the new requirement. Because remember, that whole emergency order ended at the end of July. And so this is kind of an option that boards can consider if they choose to go that route.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've always done has been to have all that information up here. So someone coming into the meeting would see it, and then we were doing the, the roll call voting and so on. But for the most part, if we're talking about an agenda item, Mike would typically have it up on the screen, so people who are participating remotely would be able to see it. In this particular situation, if you're going to go remote, you'd want to be posting all that as much as you could ahead of time.
Yes.
Marcy?
Would that include things like if we're appointing someone into a position like resumes and things? 'Cause I know
No, nothing that would be considered, executive session or personnel or something like we would pass it out and then have to collect it like we do with that. No, we wouldn't put that up.
Yeah.
A question for Mike, if possible. How significantly have our remote participation numbers dropped in the past board meeting or two?
The last couple of meetings, there's been there's been a handful of visitors. It's
Okay.
mostly been the administrators who aren't able to come in the evening and other staff.
Okay.
Tonight there appears to be a handful of names I don't recognize.
And you'd still be able to broadcast it, so people could still watch it and pay attention to it and know about what was happening. And, you know, what is done a great job when they are here to broadcast, and it looks like they're doing that more frequently, which is helpful as well.
But in order for anyone to participate under that, they'd have to physically be present, correct?
Anyone to either speak to the board or board members themselves to participate would have to be actively present.
And that includes administrators? Or could they come in remotely?
They couldn't say anything if they did. So that might be one good reason. No.
We gotta get out of this.
Wendy?
I want to take a minute and speak to the reason I haven't been sitting in the last couple of meetings is that for me, wearing a mask creates a health issue. So for me to sit here right now with a mask on, especially speaking, can affect my health in a negative situation. So when you're making this decision, I would like to ask that you consider that there are at least one person on this board who coming in and wearing a mask is causing an issue. I would love to stay on the board, but if I cannot either not wear a mask or find a different way to wear it, shields don't work that come down over my face because it burns my eyes. And I was told that the shield, the smaller shield that comes up is not acceptable. So when you're making this decision, consider that there are people, and I'm not the only one in this district that probably has this issue. I probably would not be able to stay on the board if we don't have some kind of option for an ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's very important that you think about that as you're making this decision.
Erin?
I think in the discussion or in the video, they had touched on if it fell within the realm of a disability, it would be an exception, correct?
We've had that conversation with our attorneys. I wouldn't rule that out, except that there would have to be a lot of detail that would be provided. And I can't guarantee that. Wendy and I have talked about this a little bit. We certainly could continue to explore that.
Can that be, I mean, this is after all the first reading approval.
Yeah.
Can that be clarified prior to a second reading?
I don't know if it can be, David, honestly, because I mean, we've already, I'm not sure.
But you can, I mean, it can be attempted.
Yes.
You will make some further effort in that regard prior to a second reading.
Yes, I can continue that conversation. Wendy and I maybe need to sit down and get some specifics.
Right, okay.
David, then Knight?
Do we have to vote on this tonight? Is this something that can wait?
I would recommend you
More
vote on it
information?
tonight.
Excuse me?
It's a first reading. I think I would recommend that you vote on at least the first reading tonight.
And, well, yeah, one thing to keep in mind is it's a fairly lengthy process for the first reading, second reading. Usually the policy committee would come with a recommendation tonight. I think they talked it over but didn't want to make a recommendation because they wanted it to be a board level discussion. But yeah, this doesn't make it definite. We still have to do a second reading before the policy is in place. So regardless, any policy we vote on tonight won't even be in effect for the December meeting. It won't be in effect till January. Maggie?
Thank you. I really advocate and support your point, and I think that when I was watching that video, I agreed. There are so many different times and ways that maybe a board member cannot attend in person, and I think that we can trust each other that, you know, one of the points that if you think that you're gonna have a member who's just not gonna show up because they don't wanna have to get out of their pajamas or their house or whatever they said, like, I don't think that we have that situation here, and I think that once we say, no, absolutely not, like, to Wendy's point, like, no, we're not gonna consider your situation, or we're gonna, then we're saying no to any situation, and in the same way, we have to say, yes, we want you to be a board member, you are elected as a board member, we want you to be able to fully participate. I mean, it's an issue of access, right? And so whether it's an ADA specific issue of access, or if it's something that has to be considered in a different light of access, like, that would be the reason that I would say we do need that third level of policy where we can allow for. And I understand that it's a pain in the butt to have to open that up to the public every single time, but I also think that we have a duty to support the elected board members in this room.
And just, I want to be clear, so you can do anything, you know, and either of those three options would be fine. I mean, the thing that we could do to address your point and David's point is, if you approve the first reading tonight, we can explore whether or not there's anything that we can come back with to give you the specifics about an ADA exception or whatever. And then if that works, and that seems like it meets the needs of the board member that's, or board members that might run into that situation now and in the future, then you can approve it as a second reading. If not, you can just say, no, okay, we're not gonna approve the second reading, we're gonna go back to square one and we're gonna start again. But that'll give us at least 3 weeks to continue the conversation. And it's just, I want to be right up front, it's an expensive conversation. So just understand too that is going to mean we're going to incur some attorney costs. I think it's worth doing that if the board is supportive of that. So that'll give us some time.
If we said, it doesn't matter if it's an ADA exception or if it's just a personal situation, like.
Then you're going to the third option.
Yeah.
That's what that third
So
option
would we
is.
save money if we just did that?
Well, yeah, you would save money. It would just mean that you would then have to understand that that all of your meetings would be remote, and that anybody who wanted to participate remotely could participate remotely, and that we would have to have the roll call votes, and that we would also have to have, you know, the information provided ahead of time. So you can do that. That's absolutely one of those options. So if that's the way that you'd want to go, then you should vote this motion down and make another motion.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think her hand is
Okay,
up.
Stephanie, thank you.
I was gonna ask if it would be possible to amend the motion to combine options 2 and 3, in that option 3 would require either the superintendent's or the chair's approval, and that maybe would address some of Dave's concerns about that option 3. If there had to be some sort of formal approval within a 72-hour period or something, in order for a board member to be able to participate remotely, and then we don't have to worry about the ADA or anything, because it's going through a filter.
I don't think you have options within those options that Bill has outlined. I think it's one of those 3. It sounds to me, though, that the third option, you know, the most extreme option for change, if you will, would be the one that would support that. Because if, no matter what it would be, like if there was an exception that was being made between the board chair and the superintendent, for example, once that exception was made, it would go, the whole thing is remote for everybody. So
Right.
you can't just make that one exception for the board member. It
I'm
would be
saying
for everybody.
each time it would have to be a request that would then need to be approved. So if I'm traveling, or if something happens and I can't physically make it, I would then need to come to you or Danny and ask for approval in order to be able to have the meeting remote.
That's the third option.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that-
it does need approval. The third option would need approval. Is what you're saying? Option 3 would require that?
Anytime you're participating remotely, it's remote for everybody. And so the third option basically is saying that you're gonna provide that option. And if you're providing that option, my understanding in reading it is that you're gonna have remote meetings.
But no, I don't think it would require approval. It might require notice possibly,
Yeah,
but.
But your meetings would be remote,
Right.
all meetings would be remote.
if you vote for that third option, that's my understanding, after watching the video.
Well, it would be remote option.
It doesn't mean that no one would attend.
If no board member wanted, for the month of December, if there was no board member, then it seems like it wouldn't be necessary. That's what I'm saying, if we could combine those two, so it's not an all or nothing situation to appease anybody, you know, it appeases everyone, so we don't have to worry about always having the roll call, always having the public participation. It's just on a request basis.
Okay, so your question then, I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. So your question is, if we had a situation where we weren't going to be requiring any, where no one was participating remotely, would the board still have to have the meeting available remotely for everybody? Right? So you're saying, I think what you're saying is, could you eliminate the remote call-in option, for example, if we weren't having any board members,
If there was no request.
if there was no request?
Basically, I'm complicating things.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty complicated already, so I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question. Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest that you vote on a first reading tonight of anything. And I'll bring all these questions back, and so that, let's say you vote on a first reading for Mr. Jones's option. And we come back to the second reading, we get more information about your question, or information about ADA, vote down that first reading. You don't have to approve the second reading. In the event that we don't, then you can vote for it. Or you can vote this motion down tonight and make another motion.
Well, could we vote on this motion with clarification that we're going to look to see if we can,
I think that would be the intent, yeah. I think the minutes can reflect the fact that we're going to continue to look at the questions that have come up tonight in preparation for that second reading.
Do I understand?
Go to Mark's.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
And then-
I beg your pardon.
So this may have already been addressed. Now, I'm super confused. So,
Leave it alone.
so the third option, so I guess, maybe I have the unpopular opinion, what's new, that I feel that the board definitely engages better and has better conversation when we're all in the same room. There were actual Zoom meetings where there were people via Zoom that did not speak at all, and I probably heard almost everybody speak tonight. So I just feel like for our community, I think better discussion happens this way. So I would want to look at an option that, if obviously we want to support Wendy, but I would look at an option where it was more of like a medical determination, like you know what I mean, like something that was more specific to that. And I'm not sure that it sounds like in the third option you can make those distinctions. Like a medical option, in my opinion, would be something you have a doctor backing you up and something like that, and then it would be whether or not the chair and the superintendent kind of okayed that. So just my perspective, but
These are, I made other copies, they're all in the same color, but you can pass those around. Just, it's a separate summary of the policy, aside from the 25-page memo that came out before. It might help people.
At this point, the problem would be, if we don't move a first reading, we postpone any decision by at least another month.
Right.
Whereas, as you have taken the minutes, if we simply vote for this motion, it does not commit us to anything, and it commits you to looking further into the various questions that have arisen.
Right.
And to be attempting, well, insofar as you get answers, giving them to us prior to the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think so. And then if you don't get the information that you feel is sufficient by the next meeting, then you don't vote on a second reading and it goes back, it just doesn't get approved, so you're back to square one.
But otherwise we're back to square one now, and it's going to be a long haul.
See, I think if you look at the second page of this pass out, I'm sorry.
Oh, back.
At the very top, it just says, if the board allows or is required to provide an opportunity for public participation, public input during the meeting, it talks about how you do that. And then it goes down below to say that, you know, what you would have to do. Members of the public participating are expected to comply and so on. Looking at this one pager is, or two pager is, three pager, is probably helpful. The other part that I didn't mention that that would need to be addressed, we did talk about this earlier in one of the committee meetings, is that if you do remote, there has to be a guarantee on the part of the board members that they are in a place where there's nobody else around during an executive session. So there's nobody walking through the room, or there's no access to conversations and so on. And I don't bring that up because of anything that's happened necessarily in this district, but across the state there have been lots of situations where, you know, there'll be an executive session and there'll be people walking around in the background. So it's a violation of executive session privilege.
And you'll be the one who's expected to detect all that.
Right.
No, worse, if you're in executive session, I can't participate.
Of course.
I'm not online at all during
Of
it.
course. How lucky.
I've been exiled to the other office.
So, in that paragraph, Dr. Murphy, that you just pointed out on the top of that page too, it says, individuals with disabilities seeking reasonable accommodations should contact the board chair or. So can we insert Stephanie's?
Well, I think it's in there. I think that's in there, right?
That's what she was just reading from page 2.
Right.
But it says or and then
So we can insert something there to make it specific to us. So could we insert Stephanie's language that she just authored? That would be approved?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you don't do that tonight. That you go ahead and do something tonight for a first reading, either option 1, 2, or 3, and then let me do some exploration with some more work with the attorneys. And just, I'll talk to Bill directly and say, okay, this is what's come up. Tell me how to make this work if I can, and if I can't, just tell me that, and I'll bring it back to the board and let them know that
my
it's...
concern seems to start to be addressed in the very first sentence. It says, our district allows members of the board to participate in a public meeting of the board by remote methods in limited circumstances. So we would just have to expand on that, and it would cover it. Just expand on it requires approval, which Maggie just pointed out. You know, they have to contact the board chair or, and we could just add for approval.
But you can, but as soon as you do, I guess I'm just trying to drive home the point that you can do that tonight as a first reading, but as soon as you do that, no matter what the reason is, if you have any board member who is participating remotely, everybody is participating
Right.
remotely.
I guess I was getting confused because it was sounding like if we approve this, then every meeting from here to infinity has to be remote. But this reads very specifically that it's under limited circumstances, and if it needed to be approved, then it likely won't be a big deal forever. It'll just be under those limited circumstances based on chair approval.
But if you have a situation where you have a member who isn't able to attend, then pretty much you're saying this change in policy is meaning that you're going to be going remote until such time as perhaps there's a change in board membership.
Well, if that board member forever couldn't be at the board meetings,
Right.
yeah, but
Okay. No, I mean that's just
if
important for you to
masks come
recognize.
off one day, Wendy will be back with us.
If
know,
masks
we'll
come off,
back
we'll all be
everybody.
happy. So, that's right.
And I just want to point out that I've been here.
Right.
Right.
I've just been a couple of doors down.
Right.
And I've been watching everything that's going on, but as of right now, because we don't have a policy, I can't vote unless I come into the room, and I can't participate. I can't say anything without coming in and putting on a mask. And wearing the mask is where I have the issue, because that's what causes my problem.
And that's because of the governor's emergency order being lifted at the end of July.
Right, right.
All right, here's what I'm gonna propose. Vote on something tonight. I will talk with the people who have voiced some particular concerns or suggestions, make sure I have everything together. Talk to Stephanie, I'll talk to Wendy. I don't think there was anybody else that had real specifics, but if there was, Maggie, if there's something, I want to make sure that whatever I get to Bill, I do it once, and I say, okay, here's what it is that we want to look at. Either say we can do this, or modify it in ways that you think would help us consider the options that have come up tonight. And then,
This is not the motion that's on the floor, right?
no, the motion that's on the floor right now is that you would basically approve emergency meetings for, only in the event of an emergency situation as determined by the, like a emergency situation, like in the ones that have been given as examples, are like blizzards or weather conditions or pandemic, well, not individual kinds of things.
So if we wanted this, we would vote that down and then make a motion to vote on this? Is that correct?
That's what I would do, yeah. I think that's cleaner.
Yeah, or going back to David Bartlett's position, just don't vote on anything and say, okay, we're willing to kick the can down the road for another month, and we've got the questions that need to be considered, and we'll bring it back to you in December for consideration of a first reading if we can get the information from the attorneys by then, and if not, it'll be January. And in the meantime, the youth board has continued with allowing the meetings to be open in terms of allowing people to participate remotely. That probably is going to have to kind of come to an end at some point in time, but that's not exactly a problem based on this policy. This policy is really specific to board member participation remotely.
I think we have enough here to work with to vote on it with those stipulations of the clarification.
Okay, so you got a motion on the table.
So, is everybody clear on the motion, first of all, that we're voting on? So again, that's basically the second option as it's written in the way it was presented to us. Any questions on that? We'll vote on that. If it fails, then somebody can make a new motion. So, any questions on that?
We're voting on the second option, on their new, or
The
his
motion
motion?
on the floor, not
David's
motion on
motion,
the floor.
yeah, David's motion, which was the second option
Right.
to basically return to meetings in person with the exception of if the chair or superintendent calls a remote meeting due to an emergency situation. So other than that, they do regular in-person meetings. So, everybody good on that? Yeah. So all in favor of that? David. Marcy. Myself.
So three, did you get those three?
3.
Deb, did you get those? David Jones, Marcy, and Danny?
Yeah.
Okay.
And opposed? Everybody else? Okay.
So your next option could be, you could either table it and have me do the homework and bring it back to a first reading, which might be cleaner at this point than trying to mess around with the language ourselves, and bring it to you in December after I have a chance to talk to Bill Stockmeyer.
I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second.
Okay, so table,
Yes.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, I back with a motion to table.
and Aaron Collins.
Aaron second.
Yep.
Cool.
Did I really say that?
Discussion.
Throwback, what can I say? She was just sitting in my office across the hall, wasn't that long ago, for good reasons, for good reasons.
And best.
So do we have a way to make it so that if we want to attend, but we can still have Wendy attend remotely? That's not.
So
You can't, it's one way or the other.
Yeah, as soon as you have anybody attend remotely,
They all have.
everybody has to have access to attend remotely.
But that doesn't mean we can't be in person.
Right.
You can still come.
We can still be.
Everybody
still
else is-
come,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
We can all
yeah,
still
it's just
come, but-
individual people.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the option too.
Okay.
Alright,
This might seem kind of silly, but could we move forward with the understanding that we all recognize it's better to meet in person if possible? So you would make your best effort to be here and to participate and, you know, like, I don't know if it would be moot if it wasn't an amendment or such, but
Yeah, I don't
we
think it
just
would.
have that understanding.
Yeah,
going
I
forward.
mean, once you have a policy that gives people the exception, you know, I mean, you pretty
Fair
much,
Yeah.
you pretty much have the exception. And I'm not opposed to that. I just, you know, this is a hard thing. If you read the whole packet, it's not an easy thing to get your head around. And we've seen that tonight, just in terms of some of the questions that have come up. You know, it's a little bit cookie cutter, and that's really hard when you're trying to make the adjustments like we've all been trying to make for the past 2 years. All right, but I think I've got enough information that I can explore it. If you do vote to table this, then I'll have the conversation, I'll start that conversation with Attorney Stockmeyer tomorrow.
any further discussion? So just know that that's gonna mean there wouldn't be a first reading until at least December. So it's gonna push it back that far.
Yep.
And is there any concerns for not having the policy in place? Are we just operating under the former policy?
Yeah, you're operating under your former policy until such time as the policy changes. You're operating under the requirement that everybody be here in person in order to vote, because that's the law right now, until you, that's the way you have to do it until you approve some type of policy that changes that.
So the motion is to table it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Good conversation, thank you.
All right, motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Stephanie?
Everybody had their hand up, did you see that?
Unanimous. All in favor?
Thanks, guys. Good meeting.